Hello everyone, Sam here, and today we gotta talk about pulp art books. Uh, a little background. On my desk right now, I have four art books that are heavily focused on art from the pulps or art inspired by the pulps. And this was something that I saw on a catalog I got from Hamilton Books. If any of you are unfamiliar with them, Hamilton Books is a book depot that sells a lot of books for extremely cheap prices. They essentially buy up a lot of the supply of books as well as DVDs and CDs. And they buy up all these formats and they sell it to you for a reduced price compared to a lot of the more well-known retailers like Amazon or Abe Books. And they're very useful. I've used them for several years now. And you can find a lot of really neat things on Hamilton Books that can sometimes be hard to get in other retailers. So I saw this one of these catalogs back in February, and it mentioned, oh yeah, we have a bunch of art books and a lot of art books dedicated to the pulps and showing pulp artwork. So I bought four of them because I wanted to sort of see, well, how would you do an art book devoted to pulp art? And I found that all four of them kind of stretched the wide breadth of what you can do with an art book. And I sort of thought about it. I went, art books are not really examined on BookTube because most of us here on BookTube are focused more on the literary quality of books, not necessarily something like an art book that is mainly focused on displaying, well, art. It's not as focused on a literary book, and it's more providing a visual experience than a literary experience. So I thought I'd talk about these four art books that I got because they kind of show all of the things that you can use an art book for, as well as showing sort of the strengths and weaknesses of an art book and how they can be both very useful and also somewhat disconcerting if they don't do certain things right. And another reason I really wanted to review this is that I'm going to return two of these art books. Two of them, I just don't feel they provide a whole lot that I'm interested in. Two of them do. Two I will keep because they're very well put together. And so I wanted to talk about this before I sent two of these back to Hamilton Books. That's the other big thing about Hamilton Books. If you send the books or DVDs or whatever you bought back to them within 60 days, they'll give you your money back. Obviously, you have to pay the postage, but if you're not interested in what you've purchased, you can easily send it back. And they don't ask any questions, and they'll refund your money. So I'm getting close to the 60-day mark, so if I'm going to review these, I have to send them back before a certain date. So if I'm going to review these, I need to review them pretty quick here. So that's what I'm going to do. So the very first book we have here is titled Strange Days, Aliens, Adventurers, Devils, and Dames. And we got this pulp artwork on the front. And this one has a variety of classical pulp illustrations. These were illustrations and covers from the Pulp Fiction era, which, for those of you that don't know, roughly stretches from 1896 to 1949. A couple of pictures in here go beyond that into the 1950s, but it generally keeps within that established pulp time frame. As you can see, this is a big book. This is the biggest of the books by far, at least in terms of overall size. It's not the thickest book, as we'll see in a minute, but it's definitely the biggest. Like, look how long this is. It's over a foot long, going lengthwise, or I'm sorry, height-wise. But it's a nice big book, and so the pictures are nice and big in this one. In regards to features, it does have a one-page, obviously a one page is pretty big in this instance, but a one-page essay by Arnie Finner called 10 Cent Wonders, and it shows the and it talks about the history of pulp magazines, and particularly with emphasis on the history of pulp illustrators. Obviously, it's a very brief one. It's not terribly long, but it has that in the opening, and the cover illustration is actually the very first illustration within the book too. And according to this, that illustration is by Virgil Finlay, and was published as the cover to the July 1942 issue of Famous Fantastic Mysteries. So that's one thing that I like about this book. It actually lists the pulp magazines that the artwork originally appeared in, at least for most of them. There's a couple of them that the editors of the books either couldn't find out who the artist was, or they just didn't have access. One thing I didn't realize until I just looked now, this book was originally published in 2009. So this is kind of an older art book. So maybe it was, I know 2009, there was still plenty of pulp scholarship, but maybe at that time it was a little harder to figure out who was the artist or not in those days. But they have most of the artists in here, so that's very cool. And the fact that they list which pulp magazines these illustrations appeared on is very cool too. Not all the other books have that feature, so that's a very cool feature about this one. It also has a very wide array of artists in here. It has several shadow artists, shadow illustrations by different shadow cover artists. There's a couple of Doc Savages, because they got like Walter Baumhofer, the Doc Savage guy, the famous Doc Savage cover artist. Emery Clark, he did some Doc Savage. So yeah, there's plenty of good stuff in here. So I really like that they have such a wide variety of artists here, as well as artwork. Like, there's plenty of fantasy, crime, and pretty much anything else you can think of, hero pulps. So a lot of good variety in this one. But in some ways, this is the weakest of the books, because despite those pluses I mentioned, the opening essay is it's not bad per se, but it's pretty broad. Like, it talks about half of it talks more about establishing what the pulps are, rather than talking about the actual pulp illustrators. So it's kind of a thing of it doesn't let you know a whole lot about the pulp illustrators, so it just kind of becomes a lot of buildup to explaining, oh, these are what pulps are, these are what was going on with them. And then, like halfway through, decides, oh, right, we're supposed to talk about the illustrators. Ugh. And it's kind of like, well, you ate up a lot of time doing that. So the essay's kind of meh in that regard. What else was there? Yeah, the other thing being is that it lists a lot of the artists, but it doesn't really talk about their backgrounds. That's something some of these other books do talk about, so it's a little weird seeing them go through this much effort to identify the artists, but then just not really talk about them. So that's a little odd. Another big issue is that the art rendered in this collection is kind of inconsistent. Some of them look fine. There's a couple ones here that really are projected well onto this book. But then there are others that the lighting looks really off. And a lot of these, I notice them because I'm familiar with the other artwork. But yeah, some of them are just a little too dark or a little smudged and muted. Probably the one I noticed the most was this Graves Gladney. It's kind of hard to get, but this one's the Walter Baumhofer for Doc Savage. That one's fine. But this one, for Graves Gladney, it doesn't look like it on my thing because I've got it so well lit. But when this isn't under light, this shadow illustration by Graves Gladney is like really muted. It feels a little off. So there's a couple of illustrations like that where the tone seems, the lighting seems a little off. Like that's not how the illustration should be. There's also the fact that, as I mentioned, this is a big book, and the problem is that some of the paintings look a little awkward because they've been blown up in size to fit this book, but some of them don't really fit that proportion, and so they kind of look awkward in certain parts where it looks like they're slightly overextended. Like some of these look fine, but some of them, they do look a little off. It's kind of hard to say, but again, if you're familiar with some of these illustrations and have seen them before, you might notice the proportions look a little off. So again, this was a 2009 art book, back when, social media had just taken off. A lot of stuff, there was a lot of information pulp historians had gotten, but this was just kind of, I think this was just kind of one of those things where the formatting and the opening essay don't really add much to this, and if you go through this and you look at the illustrations, you might go, oh yeah, and those are there, and those are well enough, but I have copies of this at online that are clearer copies and not as cumbersome as this huge floppy edition. Admittedly, it's thin, but it is kind of one of those things that's like, yeah, this one's a little cumbersome. So weakest one of the art books that I have, but it's okay in some respects, but I think it's just one of those things that it doesn't add enough to the pictures to really justify its usage, unless there's like one or two in here that you think are just really well rendered. But yeah, this one isn't terrible, but it's not necessarily one that I would heavily recommend you get. So the second book I have is titled Sword's Edge, Paintings Inspired by the Works of Robert E. Howard. And these are, unlike that last one and every other book I'll talk about, this is a book focused on a specific creator. And it's this guy you see up here, San Julian. That's his last name, but it's also his artist's name. And this book collects paintings done by San Julian that were either adaptations of Robert E. Howard stories or were inspired by them. And this is an interesting book because this is one that is focused on one creator. It's not focused on showing a wide breadth of artwork by different creators. This one is focused only on San Julian. And in some ways, I like it the best out of the books because it does have a really great opening essay that talks about several different things regarding Robert E. Howard. The first is basically a biography about Robert E. Howard, talking about his work and just talking about the various history about Robert E. Howard. There's this one really great section in it where it talks about the various scholarship that the author recommends for researching Robert E. Howard. Let's see, who was the... just a second, let me see. Oh, is Arnie Finner. Arnie Finner, who was the... who wrote the opening essay. So... this is... that's a very fun part. It also talks about, there's also this great section in the essay where it talks about how Conan the Barbarian was adapted into things like paperbacks, comic books, film, and that's a very interesting section. And then there's a final thing the final section talks about San Julian and his history as an artist. But yeah, this whole opening essay is actually very good. It's probably the best out of all of these art books because it talks really in depth about Robert E. Howard and San Julian. So it's almost worth getting it for that. I say almost worth because there's a fair amount of things that I think kind of keep this book from fully succeeding. And one of the things is that there's really not that much in this book. Like, see, this is not a very thick book. There are only around a little over 30 illustrations, I would say, in this book. Which you might say, oh, that's a fair amount. It's like, it's not as much as you'd think. Especially when most of the illustrations take up 2 pages. So it's kind of like, yeah, there's just not a lot of San Julian's work here. And this is not meant to be a slight towards Mr. San Julian, but I've kind of been spoiled looking at artwork because I've looked at a lot of Jim Steranko, Frank Frazetta works. And one thing I noticed about this artwork is that when you put a Conan drawn in the very same style right next to each other and you do multiple illustrations with that, you start to notice how similar the pictures start to look. And like, yeah, it's the same artist. Of course it would look similar. But whenever I think of something by like Frank Frazetta, he definitely seemed like he had more of a distinct style to where Conan looked different in the illustrations. He looked the same, but he was always doing something different, and it felt like he was doing something unique. But And a lot of these San Julian paintings, it's the typical thing of Conan fighting people with a sword or an axe, and it's kind of framed the same way multiple times. And it's like, well, it's painted very nice, but I just don't find it all that interesting when they're put back to back to back. And another issue I had is that a lot of the San Julian's art here very much feels like posing. And what I mean by that is that, of course, when artists use references, most of those references are people posing in positions. Like tons of pulp artists do that. Plenty of painters still do it today. But the good artist always makes them look like, even though they're posing, there's this sense of movement to the painting, so that even though the painting is not moving, you get a very firm sense that things are moving within the frame. And there's a lot of pictures of San Julian's paintings where it just kind of feels like, no, this is just people posing. You don't get that sense of movement like you would with like a Frazetta painting. Like I said, it's not bad by any means. There's a lot of great artwork in here, but it's just kind of one of those things you look at and you go, oh yeah, that you can see someone striking a pose, and you don't get the sense that there's emotion in that pose. You just feel like, oh yeah, they're just posing, which is not what a painting should be. Like I said, this is not dismissing San Julian's work. I think it's very impressive in this book, but it just doesn't have that same oomph that like Frazetta has, or that sense of movement. So this is just sort of one of those things that it doesn't really grab me artist-wise. And that's why I'm going to be returning this book too. But if you really want to read some essay that discusses Howard's work and talks about San Julian, because he's worked with a lot of other well-known magazines like Creepy, Eerie. I think he also did the Vampirella magazine for a while. If you're interested in San Julian, you'll probably like this collection. But his art just does not grab me, so I don't really get anything from this. So, yeah, if you're interested in San Julian, or want to learn a little about Howard, you can check this out, but it doesn't do much for me, personally. So we're going to move on to the keeper books. These are the ones that I'm going to keep. And the first one I'll talk about is Savage Art. Of course, with Doc Savage on the cover. And the title is 20th Century Genre and the Artists That Defined It. It is not a Doc Savage focused collection, keep in mind. It's just using Savage's face and just giving him a good title. So I like this one because it has a very good opening essay by Frank M. Robinson titled Paint, Canvas, Action. And this is a great essay because it discusses a lot of the specific artists featured in the book. It doesn't discuss all of them, but it discusses a lot of them, talking about how an artist sort of traded their wares in the pulp era and what each of these pulp illustrators did in their own lives. Like Shadow cover artist Graves Gladney is talked about. Norman Saunders is talked a little bit about. Who was the other one? H.J. Ward. Harold Macaulay. So a lot of rather well-known pulp artists, and does a lot of great information about them. So that's a very strong essay. And all of these books, or I mean, all these illustrations, they go a wide range. It covers a lot of the pulp art. It has the pulp heroes like Doc Savage in the Shadow. It has westerns. It has crime illustrations. So it covers a wide breadth of the art for the various pulp genres. I also think that the coloring is much better on this, or I should say the contrast. There's better light in this. There's better color grading. There's not as much as that weird darkness that Strange Days had with some of the illustrations. It feels much better. And some of it might be because it's a hardcover book, not a softer paperback one. But whatever the reason, I think it's better portrayed here in Savage art than Strange Days. They also list every artist's work, all the artist names of whoever does it. The one thing it doesn't have is it doesn't say which issue of the Pulp magazine each art piece originally appeared in. So that's kind of a bummer about this. It's better rendered, but it doesn't tell you where the art came from. So that's a bit of a bummer. The artist names are also kind of put in a weird way. They're not put right under the illustration or above it. They're on the side and they're sideways. So you have to turn the book sideways to read what's going on, read their names. So that's a little frustrating, but this one does do a good job talking about the history of pulp illustration and the specific pulp illustrators, and I think it's just an overall better formatted book than Strange Days. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, all of the books I'm talking about today, they are by a company called Underwood Books. So these are all Underwood Books products. The last one I have here is titled Shameless Art. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I run a podcast called Suitors of the Domino Lady podcast, and it's focused on the pulp heroine, the Domino Lady. And one of the things about the Domino Lady is that she was written for spicy pulp magazines, which were aimed at a more adult clientele with their subject matter and illustrations. Now, by today's standards, a lot of the stuff in there would be like PG-13 stuff, like really not that explicit by today's standards. But those pulps needed artists too. And as such, they needed pulp artists who knew how to draw women. And this collection, Shameless Art, collects a lot of the pulp covers with women on them, and as well as later pinups from the 1950s. And I can't show a lot of what's in this book, mostly because, not necessarily because it's hugely explicit, but I'm not sure what YouTube's stuff censorship is, and I don't feel like marking this for adults only. There is a, I will say there is a, there's a fair amount of scanty women in this, so it's not a it's not necessarily something you should leave lying around, but it's meant to show exactly what these pulp illustrators were drawing in this time. And there's actually a really nice essay in the front by, what's his name? Let's see. Edward Mason. And Edward Mason talks about how what the rules of sexuality were in the 30s to the 50s, the things you could or couldn't do. Talking about how pulp illustrators sort of had to go through that, and how they could talk about the sexuality in a way that wouldn't anger the censors. So that's kind of an interesting essay regarding that. And there's a good choice of variety in the artwork. A lot of it is what you expect, women lounging around, but there are some like action scenes, a little bit of fantastical sci-fi stuff. So there's a lot of good variety in this work. I can show you this picture. This picture gives you an idea of what to expect. You know, the lady in the Navy uniform on the cannon. That gives you an idea of what these artists of the time could get away with. It's like, yeah, you know what it's implying, but because it's not showing anything, you know, you can get away with it. So a lot of good variety in this. The artwork is reproduced fairly well. This one has the same problem as Savage Art, where the artwork, the artist name is given, but it's on the side and it's sideways, so you have to turn the book to figure out who actually illustrated it. So that's kind of an annoying thing. And this, just like Savage Art, it does not list the original issues that these illustrations appeared in. It doesn't show the original, it does not tell you the original pulp magazines they appeared in. So that's kind of an irritating thing, but whatever. So yeah, this and Savage Art are very well put together, and I think these are the two of them that are worth having. So if you're interested in pulp artwork or pinup artwork, you can definitely check Savage Art and Shameless Art out on HamiltonBooks.com or any other vendor if you can find them. That's all the books that I'm going to talk about, and the one main thing I hope you guys get from this is that art books can be just as difficult to make as actual literary books, because it very much depends on the content and how that content is depicted. Like I said, Strange Days does a good job at telling you where this artwork came from, but because it transfers the art in a bit of a weird way and ruins some of the contrast for some of the artwork, it kind of puts a damper on it. Meanwhile, stuff like Savage Art and Shameless Art don't tell you where they're from, but they portray the art much better. They reproduce it in a much cleaner way. So keep that in mind to anybody who is into art books. You have to be careful with how you make them, because they are indeed like literary books. There's a right and a wrong way to do them. And I really hope that any books done by Underwood Books will bring back that thing they did for Strange Days, where they say where the artwork first originally appeared, which pulp magazine they first appeared in, and the month of that release, because that's very nifty, and that would be very helpful for anybody trying to track a lot of these magazines and track their history. All right, well, that is all I have to say about art books. Let me know, anybody here, if there are any pulp art books that you would recommend that focus on pulp illustrations. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.